we're gonna get right into it. The CFP has been updated. We are on rivalry. Conference championships are not too far down the line. The bowl games, all that stuff is right around the corner. So look, let's get into it right now because this has caused a lot of debate and stir. It's first in our group chat, but all over the country. Let's go ahead and look into it right now. Here is the current CFP picture with Oregon at the 1 seed, Texas at 2, Miami at 3, and Boise at 4. Then you have your 5-12, Ohio State, Arizona State, your 8-9, which is Georgia versus Tennessee. Give me 1 second. And your 6-11, Penn State, Indiana, and then your 7-10, Notre Dame versus SMU. Alex, I'm going to come to you first. When you look at those top 4, Oregon, Texas, Miami, Boise State, what are your thoughts, man? Do you think that's where we're going to be come CFP time, or,
I think 2 out of the 4 will be there. I don't think Texas is going to be there. I think Georgia has their number, so I think Georgia's going to win the SEC, and they'll probably take the 2 seed. And I'm not as confident in Miami as I used to be. So I think there's definitely a potential for them to lose today or this weekend, against Syracuse. Kyle McCord and that offense, they can score at will, depending on the game. And then that would leave Clemson and SMU in that title game and one of them getting the first round bye. And I honestly think Miami and SMU could take that game. So I'm not confident in Miami to hold that spot, but I think Oregon and Boise State are probably going to win their conferences. Although again, I've been saying this a couple times here, if you're Oregon or Ohio State for that matter, why do you want to win the Big Ten? You bring up that bracket again. Their reward for winning the Big Ten and getting the 1 seed in this playoff would be playing the winner of Georgia and Tennessee. Versus if you're the 5 seed, you can host Arizona State in your own stadium and then go play Boise State on a neutral field.
Great point.
Which one's the easier path? Like, to me, it's clearly that 5 seed. So I think it's broken a little bit. I think realistically you should reseed after each round, and that way that 1 seed's actually worth a damn. But yeah, there's a few different things to look at with this playoff bracket.
Oh, absolutely. And Will, I'll come to you. Like, honestly, when you look at these 4, to Alex's point, I mean, this probably won't be the same when we actually start playing the games. But when you look at this 4, we know the positives, we know the negatives. How confident are you in these 4 teams?
Could you bring them up again for me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it makes sense based on how the season has gone right now. I mean, Oregon beat Ohio State, and so they have been the best team in the Big Ten. Texas right now is, the leader in the SEC with some of their wins here. So I think going into this rivalry weekend, everything is the top 4 make a lot of sense. It's the round before that where I don't think the matchups make a lot of sense. That's where I think they can have some fun with this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And look, I think the main thing is that this is up for debate, but it's also up for change, and we don't know what's going to happen. But let's go into those matches you're talking about. Well, I'll come back to you. Ohio State, Arizona State in the 5-12 ball game. When you look at that one, we know how good Ohio State's been. Arizona State's been playing very well in a very hotly contested Big 12 conference. When you look at a game like this one, where you have one that's been perennial dominant team, Ohio State, we know how good they are with only the 1 loss. They just, like you mentioned last week, boat race by the score, Indiana. And then you have an Arizona State team that battle-tested, been playing above their weight essentially. When you look at this game, do you look at it as a good competition, or is it a blowout? I mean, what are your thoughts on that one?
No, I mean, you give a lot of credit to Arizona State and their head coach. He's probably in line to get a promotion somewhere. But no, I mean,
apparently.
Excuse me, say that again?
Apparently there's NFL teams that want them.
Oh, interesting. But no, I mean, I think that's the beauty of the playoff, because if that was a bowl game, That's a terrible bowl game because Ohio State could not care less about that game. But now that it's a playoff game, they're going to be motivated to show, hey, listen, we can win and keep going. We didn't win our conference, but we have championship aspirations and we can go after it. So I would not love that game. Where I saw the things that need to be adjusted is I don't want to see a repeat of conference matchups. I don't want to see a repeat of a game that happened 3 weeks ago when Georgia and Tennessee already played. So and plus it's even more exciting for people to go against conferences. That's what the beauty of March Madness is. They're very careful when they do their matchups, and they wait at the very least, it could be Sweet 16, but they will wait until the Elite Eight or Final Four before they are going to have two elites from a conference potentially meet. And I think the committee I think they'll do the same. I think there's enough data out there to see that's important because there's some really fun matchups taken. Just take the teams that are in there right now. You could reseed a little bit, which is going to happen regardless because of conference championships. And you could have some really fun matchups.
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at this, to Will's point, Georgia, Tennessee, we've seen that before. You know what I mean? And then Indiana, Penn State, hey, that could be an interesting matchup. But to the
first one to win to get 10 points in that game.
So obviously but these are matchups to your point that are conference. Alex, I'm gonna come to you. Notre Dame, SMU. SMU has been the shocker. They come into the ACC, only one loss. They're in the ACC championship. They're in the driver's seat right now. And then you go to our buddy Eric Kelly's Notre Dame, who also has been playing well as of late. They kind of have this stigma that once it comes to that December, January, they kind of fall off. But what do you, when you think about this game? I mean, is this a hotly contested matchup? Like, what are you thinking about if this is the one that we get for the 7-10?
I think it's closer than some people expect. I like Notre Dame to take that game. Another very underrated aspect of this first round of the playoff is the higher seed hosts the game. Yes. So right now you'd have Penn State hosting a game. You'd have Notre Dame hosting a game. You'd have Ohio State hosting a game. Those are all cold weather spots. And you'd have a team from Texas going. You'd have a team from Arizona going. And then you have another cold weather team playing in Indiana going to Penn State. But if they seed it so these warmer weather teams are going to these colder weather teams, that puts a huge dynamic into this game, limits the passing game, really favors the running game, where it makes it really interesting to see how these games are going to play out.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
That is what I was kind of thinking about with what makes it exciting. It's not just SEC versus Big Ten. It's going to the elements you're not used to. I jokingly said first team to score 10 points, but that could be the same in a playoff matchup too. Exactly what you're talking about. I mean, we saw what just happened last night. Now I turned the game off at halftime, but the Dolphins went up to Green Bay, and the same situation happens. And that is a completely different environment. Today's game in Madison, I think my wife was saying it's going to be 20 degrees maybe.
Jeez. Yeah.
No SEC school is used to playing in this. They don't want to get tackled in this. No quarterback wants to be out there. They're going to have the heaviest coat they can put on. Yep. That is, I joke about the low scores of the Big Ten, but when you get to November football, things change. The elements change the game, just like they do in the pros. The kickers have a whole lot more trouble kicking a 50-yard field goal. So it could make a lot of fun.
Hard,
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And another thing that I love about this is one of the things that we always complained about was around this time, you get to the end of the season, the conference championship, even in between the last game, the conference champion was a week or so, but then you had that gap from whenever the conference championship was, or even if they didn't get to the conference championship, all the way to the bowl, which was almost a month at times. You have injuries, things being able to heal up. Right now, these games start on the 20th, December 20th.
Yeah, you get 2 weeks from conference championship to the first round.
Right. So that's not as much time. You got these players that might not be able to heal up as well. Now we'll all have all these guys playing because it means something, and I love that. But let's stay right there. It definitely means something. We see what the picture says. Now, obviously, these next couple weeks could totally throw a wrench in all these plans. What we have right here could could be completely different from what we end up getting. But let's talk about the seeding. Let's talk about this because, to your point, Will, I don't want to see Georgia, Tennessee again. Indiana, Penn State, give me. I don't really care. Like
that one, I want to see because we haven't seen it yet this year,
right?
Personally, but
true. But at the same time, to that point of Big Ten, like it's okay. I get what I to Will's point. I want to see this conference, that conference. Oh, how good is the maybe the team that's the 3 over here, that's the 1 on this side? How is the team that has 3 losses over here that only has 1 over here? That's some of the things I want to see. So let's get into that. Let's get into the seeding and how exactly these teams are getting put into these places. Now, obviously, if you're outside of the SEC, there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, it's the SEC bias. You know what I mean? And this is, look at Alabama, look at this. Talk to me, Alex, about how maybe how losses have different weight. How this loss might not be looked at as much as this loss over here, or this 10-1 might not be looked at like this 9-3.
Yeah, so I think there's big wins and big losses, I think, kind of balance each other out. So when you're looking at these teams where, and it's hard because you look at, we'll use Alabama and Ole Miss as the example here, where you've got phenomenal wins. They've both beaten Georgia. But then you go and look at some of their losses where it's just like, if we're clearly at their peak, they're 2 of the 12 best teams in the whole country. But then they can go lose to teams that are barely scraping by to make a bowl game. So it's one of those things where I think you've got to look at both sides, the wins and the losses, because them both beating Georgia gives them the right to still be in the discussion. Me personally, I don't think either of them should be in because of the losses they've had to Oklahoma. Like Alabama putting 3 points up on Oklahoma is inexcusable to me. That to me was the death sentence out of the playoff. Because everyone's been able to score in Oklahoma this year at will. And you go in and put 3 points up, that's inexcusable. Ole Miss, that loss to Florida isn't as bad because Florida's been playing pretty damn well lately. They almost beat Georgia before Lagway went down there. And but their loss to Kentucky is the very bad one. But again, you look at their schedule, they beat Georgia. They beat you guys. And you guys are ranked in the top 15. So there's some of those that kind of push them, I think, ahead of Alabama if you're going to put one of the 3-loss SEC teams in. Now, I don't think it should be over one of the 1-loss Big Ten teams, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think with 1 or 2 games going the way the SEC would want them to go, I do think you could see either Ole Miss or South Carolina, for that matter, stealing that last spot. And the reason, I think, just going back to that seeding the way it is, I think the reason, just kind of tinfoil hat going on here, I think the reason they're doing that is because you've seen more and more over the year of the SEC and Big Ten talking about, well, what if we just kind of go off by ourselves and do our own little thing? Are they trying to eliminate an SEC and a Big Ten team early so that instead of having those 4 first-round matchups, having 1 Big Ten or SEC team each, they win, and your final 8 is flooded with Big Ten and SEC teams? Are they trying to kind of knock a couple of them out early so you've got a little bit more diversity in the second round of the playoff?
Yeah, and
going
that
deep
would probably,
on it.
I mean, yeah, but I mean that would also lead to more not predictable, but predictable competition. Where we all know the NCAA does not want another TCU. They don't want another Georgia boat race in TCU 65 or whatever to 7. They don't want to see that. And from my perspective, it's always who's playing hot at that particular time. And that's why I'm going to come to you, Will. Because we look at the Alabamas and the Ole Miss, and to Alex's point, yes, they have 8 wins, but those losses look rough. And then I look at a team like South Carolina, who nobody picked to be high. Nobody had them being, in their top 5 or whatever in the SEC. But you guys are playing as good as, I mean, I put you up against most any team as far as Beamer's got those guys believing. You guys play great special teams. Your defense is playing well, and your offense is definitely coming together. So when I look at that, I put them higher. What could we say about how the committee is respecting not just wins and losses, but how the team is playing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think they put that very well in place as to, I mean, they put a Georgia team that's 9-2 above an SMU and an Indiana team. So clearly they are factoring in, who is playing better. Georgia's had some really tough losses, but they are getting it together a little bit right now. So they are factoring that, and it should be. They put some teams in here that are within striking distance. They've got Arizona State within striking distance of getting in as a conference champion. They've got Clemson, who has won a bunch in a row since losing to Louisville, who could get in. South Carolina, I will say this, I'm going to pour a little bit of cold water on that. We were a miracle away from losing to Missouri. Let's not forget that. They really kind of struggled in that game.
You were one bad call away from beating LSU.
And then there's also that part as well. So, I think obviously in our private chat, I expressed some concerns about this. But if you look at the rankings going into rivalry weekend and then conference championship weekend, there's not much argument that can be made. If you're Ole Miss, if you're Alabama, and you have 3 losses right now sitting here on Black Friday, you can't be talking about how you should be in the top 10 just because of who you played. You haven't won all of them. There's opportunities for you to get in there, but there's no way you should be going in saying, hey, if we beat Auburn, we're playing in the playoff. Not yet. There needs to be some factors going in. So I think going into this, they have seeded them today very well. We'll kind of see what happens later on.
Right. And that's to that point. Chris, shout out to Vandy Chris in the comments, says Texas isn't beating Georgia. Therefore, Georgia-Tennessee will not happen in the first round. Right. And we've said this CFP is not, it could be completely different come the time when the games are actually played. Chris also said, let's go Gophers, beat those popcorn skunks. So, yo, shout it out. Chris said, no 3-loss team should be in over a 1-loss. No 3-loss team should be in over a 1-loss Big Ten team. That defeats the entire purpose of the playoffs. And Chris he's not concerned about teams getting boat race. He wants these kids that have only had the 1 loss to come in. But I think to your point that you were saying a little bit earlier, or just to the end of that about the Auburn, that's what really takes a Texas A&M out of major contention for me. I understand that if they win this, they got an opportunity to get to the SEC championship and all that stuff.
They got to win the conference to get in at this point.
Right. But they made Auburn look like a competent team. Auburn, who has been struggling all year, they made Peyton Thorne, the ex-Michigan State quarterback, look elite in this game. And you know what I mean? So that's where it's like, okay, I get it that, if by the fact that they win, if they potentially win the SEC championship, they can get in. But then it's like, do I really want to see? I mean, they got good defense, but I can't.
Conference champions gotta matter.
God,
you get rewarded for winning your conference. Doesn't matter who it is.
And that's the crazy part. I'm gonna go to what you sent me, Alex, because you were talking about, breaking these guys down. And I know you added more context to this. This is where you have it. The 3 teams, you have Indiana, Penn State, Notre Dame, their strength of schedule, their record, the best win, all these type of things. Talk to me about this in comparison to some of the other teams that might be kind of dancing around getting on the list.
Yeah, so for me, the big one I want to look at there is strength of record. So how they view strength of record is if you put other teams into that schedule, how do they fare with that? Like, how close are they to that same record? So you look at the top 10 here, and it's all playoff teams. It's Oregon's number 1, Georgia number 2, Ohio State number 3, Penn State 4, Texas 5, Miami 6, Indiana 7, Tennessee 8, SMU 9, Notre Dame 10. That's the strength of record. Obviously, strength of schedule is different. Georgia's got number 1. And the numbers for those top 10 teams of strength of record, it's all over the place. There's some in the 70s, some in the 50s, some in the 30s, all over the place. But then you look at some of those where we just had the question up of should those 3-loss SEC teams get in over that 1-loss Big Ten team. Well, the strength of record shows Penn State and Indiana higher than both Alabama and Ole Miss. Them being 11th for Alabama, and Ole Miss is all the way down at 19th. And Will, your South Carolina Gamecocks are 14th and 15th strength of schedule. Or sorry, no, 15th in the CFP ranking. 12th in strength of schedule. So that's why I think they should get in over the other two 3-loss SEC teams if things go your way. But I think if you're looking at that strength of record is the big one I'm looking at. Obviously, strength of schedule is very important as well. But I also think they kind of undervalue some teams and overvalue some on everyone's schedule. But for me, looking at that strength of record, that's the big reason why Indiana, potentially SMU, as long as they hold out and win out the rest of their games, I think they should absolutely be in.
See now, so go over Miami's and SMU strength of record. That kind of surprised me.
So I've just got their rankings here. I don't know why I don't know how they actually determine it.
Chris sent me a picture in on my messenger, and I just sent it to you guys in the group chat. Miami's they had a 10 power ranking with a 66 strength of schedule and a 14th strength of record. And who was the other team? SMU?
Yeah.
You said, Will? SMU's 11th power ranking, 68th strength of schedule with a 19th strength of record.
Come to me with this. This is my mic drop moment.
Go right there. Go ahead.
So I'm waiting for you.
No, so I was just, this is where I think it's no, a 3-loss versus 1-loss, no. But I'm looking at this at Clemson's record right now. They're the 12th team. They're out of it right now. I mean, essentially, it's the top 11 teams get in because of the chance for a conference champion to leapfrog. So it's your top 11. And if Clemson were to win tomorrow, their only win against a ranked opponent would be a number 15 team going into the game, which obviously
into the game. That was going to be my question.
Yeah. So, would even fall back further. So to me, Clemson is not in the college football playoff possibilities because you've lost to Georgia and then you beat one team that was in the teens. Like that is not do not have strong enough wins when you're having to go up against, you're winning against App State, NC State, Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia. Like those are not, impressive wins. Looking at the Miami SMU game, in my opinion, the winner between that, the loser is out. That if you were to compare a 2-loss team versus a 3-loss team, that's where I think you start factoring.
But should we penalize the 2-loss team for playing that extra game? That's where.
But that would change the quality of who they're going against. So I was looking up.
Let's add context. I'll tell you the SMU. The SMU has the 10, the 11th. Their power ranking is 11. Strength of schedule is a 68, and the strength of record is 19. So to your point.
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at SMU's schedule here, they have, so they beat Louisville, who is ranked. They beat Pittsburgh. So they have some wins against ranked opponents, which is kind of like when looking at them versus Clemson. It's like Clemson shouldn't even be considered in here. Like throw yourselves out of there. They lost to BYU, which might have been ranked at the time. Wasn't BYU ranked most of the season, and then they just kind of run it off?
Well, they're still ranked now, but yeah.
So Miami, I'm not seeing – I'm looking on ESPN, a single win versus a ranked opponent. And all year we've been talking about Cam Ward for the Heisman. We've been talking about Miami. The U is back. And then you're looking at this, and who have they beaten? I guess they're looking at here Louisville. So Louisville was 22nd when they played SMU. They were not ranked when by the time they played Miami. But so ESPN's schedule, like their schedule stuff isn't very good. They're not kind of showing. They're showing basically when the teams played them, who they're ranked. Yeah. But you're kind of looking at Miami as you haven't had to play a very difficult schedule. So I think that's when you're looking at if you ultimately have 2 losses, then we got to look at, well, who else could potentially leapfrog based on who did they beat versus who did they lose to.
See, and I agree with you there. I think if Miami's the one that loses, then I think there's that debate because if Cam Ward wasn't freaking Superman for 8 weeks this year, they've probably got 4, maybe 5 losses realistically. And to teams like Stanford and Cal and teams that are nowhere near the playoff discussion. So if Miami loses that game, I think there's that discussion there. But SMU, like you said, having those wins against at the time ranked teams, I don't think they should get penalized if they lose that extra game that some of those other teams aren't playing.
Yeah. Well, and to your point of you want to see the hot teams coming in, SMU is the much hotter team coming into these games. They're rolling right now. I mean, they are, like you said, Miami barely beat a couple teams, where SMU, besides a game against Duke, which we can also understand that everyone has a tough game throughout the year. Everyone has a down game, but then they're coming in rolling Pittsburgh, rolling Boston College by 10, rolling Virginia. It's not too difficult.
Boston College has been a pretty good team this year, though.
They have at times up and down. Yeah. No, that's where I think it's like they set up the rankings correct right now, but they've allowed for some intrigue in the next 2 weeks to see where there can be some leapfrogs here.
Yeah, because we'll get one more like unofficial one, and then that Sunday on the December 7th or December 8th, after the conference championship games on the Saturday, we'll get the full playoff bowl schedule, all that. So,
yes, and ladies and gentlemen, we will be here to give you all that, all the arguing, all the SEC, Big Ten, and ACC love. Damn it, we're still a conference. All right, y'all better show us some love. Come on, baby. Yeah, here it is. Like we said, this is it right now. Everything could change even after this very weekend with the amount of rivalry games and things going on. So definitely stay tuned, and we will continue to bring you the most up-to-date stuff when it comes to that. Yeah.
If you want to just bring up that bracket again, there's another thing I just realized. That bottom half of the bracket has such an easy path. You look at that top, Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, all would have to cannibalize each other to make the national championship. That bottom half, you got to be laughing. If you're one of those teams on that bottom half of the bracket, holy.
Oh yeah.
Well, so here's the other thing I was just kind of looking at here. Look at Notre Dame. They played against ranked opponents, but I'm sorry, Army and Navy play a certain style where you would think a Big Ten SEC team.
If you can stop the run, you dominate them.
Exactly, like they're a ranked team, but that's where I was kind of proud of my asking if they're going to play the Merchant Marines this weekend to Eric. But when Notre Dame played Louisville was ranked 15th. But they beat Texas A&M. That was a pretty marquee game. But that's another thing. You look at some of these losses. If Southern Cal beats Notre Dame's
gone.
Then you got to kind of look at it and say, but see, Notre Dame's gone. But it's the same argument though. They played more ranked teams and won more games than Miami has, than SMU has. So it's where it's not a perfect apples to apples that they've got here.
And we got it, and everybody's gonna definitely talk about wins, and everybody's also gonna talk about those losses, because even if Georgia loses to an Ole Miss, or Georgia loses somewhere, and Alabama loses to an SEC, when you have a Notre Dame who loses to an NIU, and no disrespect, Tina and Nick, I know you guys love your Huskies, but they're not on the same level, and NIU shut Notre Dame down. You know what I mean? Notre Dame couldn't do much. Now, Riley Leonard has issues passing anyway, but still, that is a very, very bad loss on their part. So, to your point, it's kind of like, we don't want to see
the worst one of the playoff teams.
Right.